Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. This is Daybreak. Advice Mundalo, Jimmy Gikwa, Hassan Boto, Eric, Christopher Muraidi, Modoni Mboro, and Nyabul Okinyo all make up my panel this morning. And many thanks for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen. Much appreciated for your time. Advice coming to you on this. It seems then that there are certainly the long list of pledges that were made by the state when you guys took to the streets in 2024, and which largely the state hasn't met. Was this part of what was supposed to have been the concrete agenda to drive the course on Wednesday?
You know, Ayub, once an agenda is something we have to deliberate, then that means there was no agenda. That is the unfortunate reality. Or else the agenda was very vague and it was not, the messaging didn't really come out. Because the only messaging that tried to really come out was the agenda on the commemoration. Because we saw the families march to Central Police Station, they had a meeting with the Inspector General, and they actually say they want to have, actually they did not even use the words protest. They actually say they want to have a march. It was basically a march to go and just lay their flowers. So it was not even a protest. So the truth is there was a problem in the messaging, there was a problem in the agenda setting of all this. Because the whole reason why, if we must be able to sit on this panel, Ayub, 48 hours later, and try to look at what was the agenda, then definitely there was no agenda. And then coming to now the issue of the promises of the president. Yes, I also largely agree that there were promises that were made by the president at that time, including the promise of justice to the families, which is one of the reasons that the young people in speech, when I listen to my brother Chris here, says is one of the major reasons why the young people are on the street. But now when you look at the issue of justice, sometimes for us to really get critical, Ayub, I have often advocated that as young people we must also be strategic and we must be able to lay the problem at its doorstep. Because sometimes we lump every problem at one doorstep and then we lose the point. Because we are advocating for the rule of law and the constitution that we heavily gave ourselves as Kenyans in 2010. Now that constitution separated some powers. We gave ourselves independent institutions. So when we are able, and we are talking about the quest for justice for the families, we must be able to have the courage to call the judiciary to order. Because when we call for justice and say we still want it from the president, we are trying to take the country back to the times when the president was absolute and he had absolute power.
But so why make the promise then?
You know, the president is the head of the government, Ayub, and what the president needs to do is to be able to ensure that every institution is able to do its job. And what the president is able to do is now to ensure that, for instance, the people and the culprits are brought to book, like we saw in the case of Ojwang. But then when these cases go to court, now we are also now supposed to take the same level of accountability and the same energy to the judiciary and also ask for equal accountability. That's why I'm saying that if young people are able to be a bit more strategic, because our issues have people who actually deal with them. When we are dealing with matters of unemployment, for instance, Ayub, we gave ourselves the National Employment Authority. When we are on the streets, it adds more sense that we are able to also say, we want to call the National Employment Authority to order and say, in the last 3 years, what have you been able to do about the jobs of young people? So that once we are able to do that, I think our messaging would be better and would have tangibles. And I think that's where this protest lost it this time, because there was no tangibility in most of our matters. When we're talking about police brutality, which is a very heavy matter, you can imagine, Ayub, with the numbers that swelled in town. If, for instance, the young people are saying the Deputy Inspector General Langat must go, you can imagine if that would have been the agenda on Wednesday, then I suspect that it would have actually been achieved. If the agenda was to say that he must be able to resign, then that would have been able to be achieved. But that was not the agenda. We had a whole lot of issues lumped up together with no single direction. And that's why when we do that, political expediency kicks in. Now, politicians start taking advantage of this. Politicians start pushing us towards the direction that they want us to be. And that's why you're able to see some of the politicians who have, you said it before we even went on break, politicians who have actually spoken directly in support of some of these things, just because they are not in government today, they are now on the side of the young people. And some of us want to be gullible enough to actually trust them.
Okay. To be blunt, you mean Rigathi Gachagua. But let me again come back to your point before I come to Jimmy and then come to Nyambura as well. Talking about the cause, for example, a fortnight ago, Kenyans went to the streets to demand for justice for Mwalimu Albert Ojwang, calling for the resignation of the Deputy Inspector General who has now stepped aside, Eliud Lagat. But it's during that peaceful demonstration that a mask vendor who was peaceful and unarmed was shot.
Unfortunate.
I mean, how then do we address the police brutality? And then the question of the politician, the president is a political animal who sought office and is now a state property, and who said all those who have been taken from their families have now been returned. And all the families that Citizen TV spoke to have not seen their missing kin. So where do we draw the line here on who holds the moral high ground?
I don't think it's more about who needs to hold the moral high ground. It's more about, can we just get the right thing done? Because, for instance, when you talk about the issue of the young man who was shot, the mask vendor, it's a totally unfortunate incident, because what makes it even worse about that case is the fact that it was not a conflict. They were not having a conflict. The mask, when you look at the clip, he doesn't even look like a gentleman who was part of the protest. He looks like a gentleman who was purely on his own business, and actually the gentleman is shot while walking away. Yeah? And there is no level of explanation that can actually be able to rescue that fact and say that you can be able to find some tangible reason why that happened. And that was an extremely unfortunate situation. And the same situation actually happened 2 days ago, where again you're talking about 16 lives that were lost. So both of those instances, Ayub, are extremely unfortunate. Now what we are supposed to be doing is calling everyone to order and ensuring that all of us, no one says, it's not about a competition on who holds a higher moral ground. Yeah. It should be, let us just get the right thing done. Okay. This policeman who has been able to shoot that gentleman, what happened to Ojwang, the 16 deaths that we were able to have, including the people who actually beat up the police, the people who were able to get into police stations and take guns, the people who were able to burn down police stations. The agenda of young people was not to burn down police stations. The agenda was not to get police uniform. The agenda was not to get into supermarkets in town and ban the supermarkets and steal. Because what happens is, the way I told you in the beginning, today we have more young people who are now jobless, courtesy of 48 hours ago. And yet we are the same country that is struggling to say we have a crisis on youth unemployment.
Thank you.
So we cannot be able to be having our cake and eating it at the same time.
Yes, Jimmy.
Yes. We were under police brutality.
Yes, please.
On the police brutality, I still hold it is wrong. It is something that should not be happening. But again, as before we came in, we were discussing, we had a small discussion outside, and I was telling them, America is the most democratic country, as per se, democratically, or rather the big brothers of democracy. And they're holding their fair share of police brutality. So I think, by and large, it is our systems. Systems have failed. And again, the agitation of our people should now go into different cadres, because we cannot go fighting the same people with guns. And again, the incident for the gentleman who was shot during the small protest that was there was a trigger individual happy policeman. Because I'm sure what happened, if you saw what they were doing, like in Makongeni, Thika, they almost burned down the whole police station. There were inmates in cell. There were families in that compound. So what do you do as a police officer? They are burning, they are throwing stones. So let us also be human. That is why I was saying we need to change our scope and try and agitate for the right things at the right time. The maandamano that happened the other day was infiltrated by the political class because it had no agenda. If there was a particular agenda on where we were going, then this country would be going in the right direction, because what they did in last year was so awesome, because even us, who are part and parcel of people who support government, also got to understand we need to communicate in a better way. But yesterday, the day before yesterday, 48 hours ago, we just went there, lost more lives, lost more property. We are not going in the right direction. We are also part and parcel of now we have become the problem, and we are adding the problem to the problem, because could you differentiate who was the goon in a supermarket and who was a Gen Z protesting. So how do we put the police force? How do we put the governing bodies in this country? How do we run? Because unless somebody has a clear agenda on what is supposed to be happening. The gentleman here, panelist also told us, he saved a police lady from being beaten. So she was being beaten by Gen Zs, right?
No.
Can you clarify, or can you put for me
a difference?
No, not even a difference. Can you have a prototype of a Gen Z
Yes.
and a goon?
Yes,
Okay, and Jimmy, I'll come to Nyabul for the right of reply. How would you describe, what is the tag that you will give the people who are escorted by police and who are wielding rungus during
Tell us about
Albert Ojwang protests?
Now, during the Albert Ojwang protest, first we did not understand how they were rungus. If they were policemen, they probably they were plainclothes policemen. Whatever was happening. Yes,
we'll get
that is what happens. Plus or minus.
Let him respond. It's his time.
Plus or minus.
We'll get you the clip. My team will give us.
Yeah. Plus or minus, the ones who came saying hakuna maandamano in Nairobi, the Governor Sakaja of Nairobi said he was not part and parcel of it. I've seen all flares in different media stations, newspapers, trying to pin the goons and the individual, but nobody has any clarity on what exactly was happening as per se.
Well, the videos will be clear to our eyes.
Yes, but nobody owned up.
How can the police escort people wielding rungus?
Nobody owned up.
An advocate was attacked right in front of the police.
What then do we see? Because we live in an era where nobody owned up, but we live in an era where the National Police Service told us hand on heart that Albert Ojwang hit his head against the wall several times and that's the cause of his death.
Now that is communication.
So how then do you see, what's your description of the people who are escorted by a police Land Cruiser?
That one is a bit funny, and you cannot actually be able to explain.
It's not
Why I would not be able to explain.
It's funny.
Allow him to his time.
Yes. Okay. Why I would not explain is because nobody gave any idea of how or who was carrying the rungus and what they were doing in particular. We have had, for instance, in other protests...
But there was a High Court order, Jimmy, High Court order that police should not cover their faces, they should be properly uniformed, their service number should be displayed during the demonstrations, and that directive by the court was not adhered to.
Can we also be very practical? Not all rules, I'm not saying all rules are not supposed to be taken and broken, but is it practical? Because as the High Court says, don't put your name and tag and all that stuff. When one individual probably makes a mistake, or the public tries and thinks he made a mistake, not necessarily make a mistake. He's put into social media. There's so much animosity towards the same lineage in terms of they are also human.
Which does not give you the license to not follow or adhere to the court order. Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I do not presume Hassan Mundalo nor my good friend here speak for the youth, especially Mundalo and Jimmy, because clearly, during the protest on 25th, when the policewoman was being hit, there were goons. There's a similar pattern. We have seen enough of protests, so there's a similar pattern. We can easily identify a goon. Goons predominantly, are usually armed with stones or rungu. Whereas this case, they were armed with stones. The other protests, they were armed with rungu. And in fact, they operated the police, they operated the policemen. Well, when Hassan says that when Hassan says that we didn't have an agenda for the 25th, it's such a shame and it's such a pity, because the 25th event was a victim-centered. Because we had members of families who lost their loved ones on 25th. And after the event, we had a promise by the president of the restitution, and victim compensation. None of them had occurred as of 25th. So when we decided to go the street, that was the clear agenda. That was the clear agenda. They were not related with the agenda, because once an event is done, there's always an aftermath. Like, for example, we had a Sabasaba in 1992. But since then, we have always have a tendency of commemorating Sabasaba, and so that we can remember the victims and we can also remember the actions that happened during that day. So when we went to the street on 25th, we wanted to make an inquest into the compensation of the victims, because, you know, compensating, the process of moving on involves healing, accountability, and responsibility. Whereas healing is solely an experience of a grieving family, the accountability and responsibility is the government's part. The government, as usual, has failed in its part in terms of accountability and responsibility. The National Torture Act of 2017 authorizes that all torture victims, they should be compensated. But, you know, 1 year down the line, all the government has done, it has had a long list of, at the VIP seat, of victims who have continued to be killed in a very unclear circumstances. Another case example, we have Albert Ojwang, whom my friend, he wants to play politics about it, but it's life. This man, an innocent man, was having a moment with the father. The police picked the policeman and they killed him. We know that. And the IPOA in its character is continuing doing the decades of investigation, zero accountability, and playing with the public mind in regards to that. Because so far we know who was the complainant, and he's still out there, he's free. And furthermore, it's such a truly world-class efficiency for the Kenya's government, because all it does, it continue adding a long list to the grieving families at the VIP seat. Yeah, we have mothers grieving, we have fathers grieving, we have a hawker who was unarmed and he was just minding on his business, and he was killed.
Yes.
We are seeing a clear spit of ignorance and arrogance in this panel, where if someone can say, indeed, if these are the provisions of the law, first of all, let me begin by saying police officers are indeed public servants. And the issue about them having to display their faces is for accountability, for safety, including their own. If these people were accountable, that is the National Police Service, they would then indeed need not to hide their faces. If there's any other job description for where people hide their faces, then let us be told. But they are indeed, as law enforcement officers, need to display their faces. If you take an action, like today, I am here as Muthoni Mburu, I do not need to hide, because whatever I am saying, my conscience is aware, and I can indeed stand for what I am talking about. And there's this the social contract theory, which says indeed that life is short, nasty, and brutish. It was done by by one of the scholars, Thomas Hobbes. And when he explains about the social contract theory, he talks about what we surrender as the public and what we indeed should get from the state. We surrender our rights. Let me emphasize that we indeed surrender. For these people to occupy these public offices, we have surrendered our rights, and themselves, for what is it for us? What is in exchange for us is protection. But do Kenyans really feel, you know, I feel like we are really diverting. The issue here is the law is very clear. I know that statement is used so many times and maybe not to communicate really anything. But the law is very clear. There's a provision for this. You know what we need is not even new laws, because we indeed have the Constitution which protects those protesters. And in the event they are goons, what should those goons be? How should they be dealt with? How should these police officers conduct themselves? What steps should be taken? You understand? So the issue of whether or not, and the right indeed for protesters to go, whether or not you believe, Mr. Advice, that they have a noble cause to go to the streets or not, their rights are protected by the Constitution.
Why is Advice?
Yes,
what is the problem?
You understand?
It is not in your place to determine the right cause or the wrong cause.
What we are fighting...
It's not in
what we are fighting is for...
we must
a one-sided
advise.
approach.
It is not in the right to
For us to
determine
get
what is
healing.
right or what is
I'm
wrong.
not here to talk
Two-sided
about
approach.
politics,
Let's
really,
slow down,
but
yeah.
the
Yes,
rule of
but we need a wholesome, a two-sided approach on this. The police are not, they're not aliens from these different countries. They're your brothers and sisters.
They should
We are
cover
not,
their faces.
they are not supposed to be doing
That's what you say.
what they are doing in
Not
terms of
scrutinize.
illegally killing.
Last time I
They should
checked,
But on
cover
top
their
of
faces.
that, they should also be
last time I checked my
protected
brothers-
for them to
Cover their
protect.
They didn't cover their
faces.
faces.
You know what anarchy? The anarchy we saw.
Last time I checked my brother and sister, they don't cover faces when they're meeting me.
Absolutely.
They don't cover my face when they're meeting me.
Yes, Hassan.
But how do you differentiate, like I asked,
Yeah.
a good
Yes,
and
Hassan, yeah. We'll have that.
Of course, I'm not a
I'll
goon.
come
We know
to
who's
that
a goon between.
No, there's that. You cannot tell me, of course.
Maybe I
You
really tell
can
you.
clearly tell who's a
Marvin?
goon.
Yes, order.
Where Marvin and
Order,
Jeets, you
order.
One of us is claiming the
We are
goon
talking
side.
over each other and we are not
Yes.
clear in our communication.
Okay.
Thank you. Maybe I can expound on what I said earlier, and I would like to put that into 4 points. One, why I do believe that we would have done it differently. It's one, there were so many missing pieces. First of it was no compelling message. Second of it, there was no strategic mobilization. Third of it, there was no visuals and symbolism. Fourth, there was no discipline. One, when I say compelling message, what do I mean? Exactly what I said. That in 1991, when the Kenyan mothers came together at Freedom Corner, I believe that there was no violence. I believed that they had one clear message: release our sons. And it's as simple as that. And the results, there was a whole global intervention to the point that they got the message clear and the impact was actually felt. And to be specific, in talking about symbolism and visual and symbolism, in 2010, when in Tunisia, when Mohammed set himself on fire,
Mohamed Bouazizi.
it was a symbol that was saying oppression. But throwing stones in parliament, throwing stones, the police and throwing stones, that is not the symbols that is going to change a law. Shattering a building or burning a building is not going to change a law. It is not a very compelling message. It is not giving symbolism and democratic. Now, when I talked about also discipline, it is in the way we handled.
But Bouazizi achieved the unthinkable, which ended up with the removal of Ben Ali from power.
That is exactly what I'm trying to say.
Which was not constitutional.
It was not constitutional,
So
but I'm
Tunisia
looking
was
at
a
the
dictatorship
symbolism.
at the time.
Yes, at the time, but we were looking at the symbolism that came with it. And if we did actually what we had needed to do, the symbolism that we had in 2024 in June, that was symbolism. That's what I'm trying to say. And we did not have that this time. I did not see it. That's why when I say that there was no compelling message and there was no strategic mobilization, that is what I meant. And when we talked about in 1990, when Kenneth Matiba and what we've talked about the Sawasaba, but they did not achieve multi-party democracy. This is what we're enjoying. We're enjoying that because they had a plan, they filed lawsuit, they did a press conference, they actually initiated the system and actually went through the system, because democracy was not done in a day, and there were processes and systems to get where we are. And all I'm asking, all I'm saying is we have a better way. When people say we are doing a procession and a march and we are being very disciplined, I just saw that a handful of people doing that when they marched to the central. But the rest, that we were supposed to actually stand together and actually say that we are marching in order to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ended up being a chaotic version of things that I, as a Kenyan youth,
Just to respond to her.
You respond to that. Allow me to bring in Chris.
Yes, thank you.
I'll come to your advice.
I want to just move away from discussing events. You know, that's the work of average minds. Mm-hmm. We are diagnosing symptoms, not the real problem. Mm-hmm. The real problem is that, you see, whenever you talk to the people who come to the protest, everyone has their own grievance. Forget the agenda. And I'm of the idea that a bad plan is better than no plan at all. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we don't have to be perfect in our communication for us to pass a message to the government. But the challenge we have is that, number one, we are in a toxic relationship with this government.
How?
And what are the signs of a toxic relationship? When you have a partner who, whenever there's a quarrel, they are not part of the problem. They blame everybody else except themselves. That is what this government is doing. If you look at the speech, the press statement by the CS yesterday, he blamed the church, he blamed the media, he blamed the protesters. Guess who is not blamed in all this? the government. That is a sign that we're in a toxic relationship. And the only cure to such a toxic relationship is a very painful divorce, which is soon coming, either through the streets or through the ballot. One way or the other, it is a one-term. Number two...
But we are a constitutional democracy.
Yes, and in a constitutional democracy,
yeah.
the Constitution, the very first article of the Constitution states that sovereign power belongs to the people. They donate it and they can take it.
And the people have invested that power in a constitutional order that says that you change your governments through the ballot.
Is protesting part of the Constitution?
Guaranteed right to protest against
Yes, it is guaranteed. So we can protest all day long, every day, as long as we wish, because we are protected under the Constitution.
And it all depends on interpretation, but the people said that we invest this power, withdraw the power from the Constitution.
Yes.
And they said we elected representatives, and there's an order as to how we do our things in our democracy.
Excuse me, let me also call you to order. It says we can either exercise it directly or through elected representatives.
Okay.
Now, those that we elected, all that we elected have gone to Parliament.
Yes.
And they have gone to bed with the executive, and therefore the people have no representatives. They have to represent themselves. And this is what I have to say. One, if we don't listen to the people in times of peace, we will have to listen to them in times of strife. And whether you hide or do whatever you want to do, change is coming. And when I'm here, Ayub, you know, I like to teach people physics. And there's a law in physics, Newton's first law of motion, which states that an object at rest remains at rest, and an object in motion remains in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless a force is applied. This government will continue with the way it's behaving with impunity unless a force is applied. That force is the young people. You will kill us, but you will not kill all of us. But there will be a turning point. And somebody said here that is a systemic problem. Yes, it's a systemic problem that we will be changed by the force from outside. Our president, his background is in zoology. That is his first degree.
See, now we are lucky.
And that's why he's treating Kenyans like we're in a zoo. And you see in a zoo, when you send someone with a gun, you are sending them to hunt.
Once you
and
do
these
a
people
PhD.
have been sent to... Hey,
once you do a PhD.
You had your time. Just calm down. Just calm down. Your time will come. You hear your point. So we must say that all that we are seeing is not a problem, indeed it's a systemic problem. The curriculum in Kiganjo, a cop friend of mine told me, when they went there, Policeman 101, they were taught that Raia ni adui. And before they got the shock of knowing that Raia ni adui, Policeman 102 came in that Raia ni mnyama. That is the mentality with which the police deal with mwananchi. But now we are changing that. They must know that the power vested in them is donated by the people. Their first responsibility is to guard life, then property.
2 points, Chris. And it's unfair to also use a broad brush to paint the police. Of course, there are thousands of officials and police members who undertake their responsibilities as the law dictates. And also, the president was sworn to office to protect lives and property. His profession, notwithstanding, the law doesn't recognize that, but rather the mandate accorded to him, which is to protect lives and property, and we hold him to account based on that. And now that he isn't here, well, we'll do that interview some other times with him. Yes, Advai.
Thank you, Ayub, finally. I think, Ayub, first of all, I think thank you for that clarification, because we were almost bordering on starting to decide which of our academic courses is relevant and which one is not. And we have so many of the people today in this country who are taking zoology, botany, the different universities of this country. And those courses are just as important as any other, because that is the whole reason why they are actually even approved to actually be undertaken. So there is no course that would be able to be said to be more important than the other. Now, and then
fits.
There was a bit, and I'm glad Mr. Hassan actually just clarified it. And you see, the loudness of our emotions does not really solve the problem. Because most of the time, Ayub, we have had this problem in this country where we do not stress on the loudness of our reason, but on the loudness of our emotion. The more emotional we become does not change the fact that we did not have a clear-cut strategy in the last demonstration. The more emotional we become does not decipher the fact that our messaging was not clear-cut in the last demonstration. The more emotional we become does not absolve us from the reality that when we said we really want to commemorate the fallen soldiers, we actually did not do it in a manner that was organized. But does that give an excuse to police brutality? It doesn't. Does that give an excuse for the killing of 16 people? It doesn't. But does that, is it a fact that we did not message through? Is also a fact. So we must be able to look at things more objectively. And there's something that my brother Chris said, and you know the passion with which Chris speaks is the same passion he voted for this government. Is the same passion he really advocated for the Kenya Kwanza administration, because I've known him for some time. And most of the problem, Ayub, is because every time we go to election, we go as emotional beings. We don't want to give it a stop and reason. And that's why I advocate for, can we be able to be reasonable as a people? Can we be able to look at the facts for what they are, instead of always just being able to say, you know what, let us just ride on this emotion. And there's something he said about everyone wants to blame the other one except government, and I totally agree with him. I would want to add him one more, that we as the people and the citizens also want to blame everyone else except ourselves. We must be able to, that's why I insist that we must be reasonable. We must come back to the background of the government that we complain so madly about. How did it get here? We got here because this government is here, Ayub, not because it was donated to us by Russia, not because it was donated to us by Uganda, but this government is here because we, the people, voted for it and celebrated the win. Okay. The parliamentarians that whose houses we are touching today are the parliamentarians that we voted for. So if there is someone that must be able to have an analytical look first, is ourselves, because we are the first point of entry. Everything that we have today is reflective of us. So the first person we must be able to blame is us. Which kind of people do we actually put out there? And the reason is because every time we get to the ballot, we do what we are trying to do here. We become emotional. And that's why today you have a deputy president, Ayub, who tells you that all members of parliament from Mount Kenya are below average. They are fools.
Former deputy president.
The former deputy president, thank you for that correction. The former deputy president tells you that all the members of parliament from Mount Kenya are below average and they are fools. And that is the member of parliament, that is the former deputy president who campaigned for each one of them. You have a former deputy president today, Ayub, who in the last time when we were in the streets, because I was in Azimio, and we were in the streets and we were talking about the cost of living, he told us bluntly that you cannot go there and expect the policeman to come and kiss you. Those were the words of a sitting deputy president. So when the same person comes today to be the highest moral defender of this, it actually doesn't make sense. And for me, and I like the interjection that you actually put, because I wanted to say that I would be able to speak for those in the wilderness, those ones who cannot speak for themselves. I look at the chaos that happened 48 hours ago, Ayub, and I ask myself, supposing the police were not there, this same police that we vilify every day, this same policemen that every time we want to speak about them, want to talk about how they got D's, how they are uneducated, these policemen are our brothers and sisters. They are actually young people. They are youth of this country. So we must be able to actually decipher and say, those ones who are rogue police officers. But we cannot be able to say the whole force is rogue. You look at the example that you gave of Floyd in the United States. They did not vilify the American police force. They vilified that particular individual. When you look at the protesters, the protests that were happening 48 hours ago, the idea of these were government goons and these ones were whoever goons and whatever, it does not help. The conversation we must be able to have is, which direction do we go? And the truth is, we had people who went to the street to demonstrate amicably, peacefully. And we had criminals. The criminals must be called out for who they are. We must stop this idea of trying to give criminals some nice tags and say these ones are called government goons, and these ones are called political goons, and these ones are whoever goons, and then try to now have a conversation about is it a goon or a Gen Z. It does not help us. We can only have a conversation about there were protesters and there were criminals. And the criminal elements took advantage of the protest. And that is a fact. And why did they take advantage of the protest? We must be able to understand that part of the reason why this was able to be taken advantage of is the lack of clarity in strategy and in its organization. Every time these demonstrations have had clarity, we have had less interference. But because politicians will want to take political expediency, they will always take advantage of any scenario. So young people must also try. We must try to ensure that everything that we do not end up serving political interests without our will. Because at the end of the day, we are ending up serving a lot of political interest and serving a lot of politicians and making them, as recently I saw them launching a justice commission or something. And this commission is being launched, Ayub,
on TikTok.
This commission is being launched, and remember, it's being launched on the pedestal of the struggles of the young people of this country. But after the struggles of the young people, the people launching it and chairing it is the former Attorney General. It's purely the political class.
And he had all the power and privileges. We are one country that is we're very lucky to have two PhD holders as president and deputy. When he was talking about zoology and botany and all that, like my brother said, there's no superior or inferior course in our university. That is why all systems, and that is why we learn everything, because everybody knows something and something they can be good at something. Police brutality is something we have shunned, even government has shunned, and most people have talked so hard about it. But we also need to understand, like I was saying, we need to not vilify everybody in the police force. We have professionals in that force, and we are also looking at asking our brothers who we were together, and in spirit, some of you are there. Even as we go to our protest and the mandamandas, let us have a clear, refined agenda, like the 2024 one. You had something to actually ask the president. You said this, you did this, we want this and that. So there were answers. So now if the agenda was to come back and go and do a recap.
Many of those things were never answered.
Yes. Now nobody actually put them in the forefront. We now went, what was happening was now...
He said so, Jimmy.
Yes.
He said we should have advisors in government. He ended up appointing extra now there.
Banda Rambe and still...
He said donations will stop henceforth going forward.
Yes.
He donated 20 million during a church service. Families compensation, they were never. Austerity measures, State House under this financial year beginning the 1st of July, and under a week's time will gobble up an extra more than 600 million.
What happens is, we need to understand political statements and mood statements.
But the political...
which is very practical.
Jimmy, I said so
political
earlier.
Statements,
let's have some order. It's time, so allow me to ask. But Jimmy, we appreciate, as advice has said, that the head of state ceases to be a private citizen and a political animal once he assumes authority. He's been given the powers to be the president.
Yes.
And therefore, isn't it fair that whatever he says should be carried with some weight and believability?
And I'm sure, in by and large, other than we are talking it and not putting figures to place of probably what he said he will do and he won't do and has not been done, because again, as the head of state...
Allow me to give you some figures.
Yes, please.
At the time he said we should have advisors. Their own, he now today has 20 plus, nearly the number of the cabinet. Donations, he said, should
20
stop.
plus 20 practical or 20 plus?
Yeah, 20 years. So confirmation you have done, yes.
Unless we have the name.
He donated 20 million Kenyan shillings during a church service. He said Harambee should stop. That is an irony. Compensation of families, that's never happened. Returning of those who are missing to their families, this never happened. Austerity measures, State House under the financial year beginning 2025-26. In under a week's time, we'll get an extra 600 million.
What happened is after the Gen Zs were successful in bringing the finance bill down fast. We did not have a finance bill. We were working on supplementaries all the way to up to probably when now it was assented. I think it was yesterday. So we have been running this country on autopilot and a lot of emotions. So what was supposed to have been done in the last fiscal year, which is practical, whether we like it or not, must be done in this next dispensation, which is 25-26. So it is not by and large, I would not want to look like I'm vindicating the president on his remarks, because I don't talk for government, but I'm a supporter of government. Yes, 100%.
Allow me to get to Councillor Nyabuto. Allow me to get to Councillor.
Yes. Okay. Allow me to touch on two things. Number one is the people who have been killed during the demonstration. And number two, the issue of academic qualification. Does it really matter to have academic qualification?
It does.
Sitting with these brilliant minds, I would want to believe, who have been in campus. Some of them I have seen they went to campus and they did indeed have academic qualifications. Wouldn't it be funny for Chris, who is a physician, he's done physics, and Modoni, for instance, if we are forming the next government and Modoni as a lawyer, heading the Ministry of Defense, perhaps, and my brother Chris heading the Ministry of, let's say, for example, being the Attorney General of this country, even without the legal qualifications of being an advocate of the High Court, or the Supreme Court judge for that, Supreme Court, head of the Supreme Court president. So academic qualifications should indeed, let it make sense. For any person who has been given a particular seat, they should indeed be fit to hold office. This is not directed towards whoever who did whatever course, but indeed the emphasis of right people holding the right office can never be overemphasized. Then the other issue, how many police officers have been killed during yesterday's Maandamano? Because there's a notion here that maybe perhaps they're officers. We haven't had that. We have not seen the cabinet secretary coming out clearly and showing empathy, or police officers showing empathy for the lives that have been lost. It goes back to accountability. Ayub, there are families that are crying today. They have lost their loved ones. I don't think we can overemphasize that. And the life of a person. You might say, perhaps you might want to say maybe fewer lives have been lost. Yay, kudos to the... Every life matters. There's a young man who was killed in Mukuru kwa Njenga, 19-year-old boy, David Mwangi, and so many other young people who had been killed. Their lives were cut short. And these lives should be accounted for. The only thing I think we should even be talking about is restitution, reparation. What are we looking at? This government, the government of the day, what actions are they taking? By them showing arrogance will not heal the nation. If we are talking about healing the nation, what is left in between? What do they want to do? To repatriate, what actions do they want to take? Do they show any empathy for the lives that have been lost? And the answer is no.
Okay. Yes, Nyabul.
Yeah, so I want to touch on two issues. First, where the buck stops, the responsibility and the weight. Yesterday, the CS for Security, Mr. Kipchumba Murkomen, while addressing the media, he said, and I quote, the police officers exercised remarkable constraint amid extreme provocation. He went further and said, there is no police officer who committed an excess yesterday. Within the same statement, as if to shoot himself on the leg, he said that if there's any police officer who is going to face a legal challenge, he's willing to pay the legal fees. A few hours later, there's a video running on the internet right now, Mr. Kipchumba Murkomen asking police officers to shoot to kill an order of any individuals who approach a police station. So when you talk about responsibility, I think it's pretty clear who is responsible and where the buck stops. Because if our senior government official, in his wisdom or lack of it, claims that there was no excess, yet there's a video circulating of a police officer thoroughly whipping and hitting me. And in fact, you know, in our culture as Kenyans, we respect the OG. And it's a sad affair that even Calligraph Jones, he was whipped, even though total disrespect. We have this guy, Arrow Boy. I saw yesterday on the internet, the man is admitted. These are men who are not harmed in any manner whatsoever. And I think on my second point, in regards to agenda, I think my colleagues here, I think they have a consistent agenda. They want to make it appear that our 25th event wasn't successful. Let me tell them, the 25th event was successful. Hold on, you'll speak after I'm done. Hold on. So the 25th event was successful. There's a group of people who were marching to State House. They had every intention to get to State House and to present their petition to the president. They received an intel via the internet. The president is in Kilifi. And you see, in our culture, you can't go to a visitor. You can't visit someone who is not in their house. So he told them, okay, just go back.
But you can still deliver the petition at the Harambee House.
No, the president wasn't there. It was a meeting between the... Hold on.
Why is State House and not Harambee?
It was a meeting between the president and the people, because it's the president who promised people last year about compensating the victims. It was the president who promised people of cutting the budget. We have Kindiki, the deputy president, and his aide, Farouk Kibet. They are running a serious Harambee in the context of empowerment. This is the very thing that he promised. Hold on. This is the only thing that he promised us. He also promised to end extrajudicial killing. Contrary to what he said, it's very sad, very shameful. There's a long list that a lot of people have continued to be killed.
Okay, yes, Hassan, I'll come to you, Chris, and then advice.
Violence is not protest. Violence is economic sabotage. And every banned matatu, that is someone's paycheck that is going to miss. Every looted shop, that is someone's child's school fees that he no longer or she no longer has. So when I sit and I want to talk to the Gen Z or I want to talk to the young people, yes, you did fought for justice. Yes, you're fighting for justice, but you left victims. Victims that no longer have jobs. Victims that now are 10 steps backward, not as individuals, but as a community and as a nation. Because of a justice that you're fighting and you're living vista. Because a revolution should not be something that is deteriorating us. A revolution should be something that uprises and also it doesn't impoverish the actual people that you're actually fighting for. So for me, I would like to look at it and say, we had an opportunity. But if we do not organize very well and actually do the due processes in getting to what we really need, then no one will take us seriously. No one is taking an angry person seriously, because right now all I'm seeing is an angry youth. I'm not seeing a brave youth anymore, because there was a time there was a brave youth. I'm just seeing an angry youth. And an angry youth is an emotion that you cannot actually put a pin on it and say, this is what exactly that you want.
Okay. Let me now sample the feedback as well as we engage the viewers from home, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we'll be getting to this feedback. Here's what you are saying on X, formerly Twitter. Bob Otieno Wino says the government must take responsibility for the infiltration of goons into Gen Z demonstrations. We witnessed some of these elements operating under the clear patronage of police, the very officers who were supposed to provide security as citizens exercised their democratic rights. Gabi Wakasiaka says this level of destruction is deeply worrying. Protests should never be a cover for criminal acts like looting, arson, and stealing police equipment. Accountability is essential, but so is addressing the root causes that drive people to the streets. Without justice and reform, frustration will keep boiling over. Frank Orinde says 1 year on, the Gen Z protests remain a turning point in Kenya's political consciousness. They sparked a national awakening, forced reversals and shook power structures. But beyond the streets, justice for victims is still pending and systems remain largely untouched. John Simon says Gen Z keep saying goons vandalized and looted was not the responsibility of those Gen Z to stop goons and report them? Or are you saying these goons in the crowds was bigger than the protesters, or the Gen Z did not have time for insta moments? Remy Butia says we must honor the officers who serve with integrity while relentlessly pushing for justice and professionalism where it's lacking. Let's channel our energy into building systems that work for everyone, not into destroying the foundations of order. True reform means holding power accountable, not tearing society apart. Sir Nixon Dugure says peaceful protests with total absence of violence are a powerful form of expressing dissent and advocating for change. And the final one from Frank says police must stick to their core mandate during peaceful demonstrations, maintain law and order, not suppress it, protect life and property, map routes and de-escalate. Protesters must be peaceful and armed and disciplined. Demos aren't a threat, it's a constitutional right. Final words here on the broadcast, beginning with you, Chris, brief.
First, allow me to respond to advice.
Yes.
who said that I cast aspersions on people pursuing zoology.
Yes.
That was not my intention. My intention was to show we go to school because what we study informs our thinking. And if the only tool a man has is a hammer, he sees every problem as a nail. So if the only information you have is about zoos, then you see everything as a beast ready to be shot. Now, my closing remarks are this. Number one, that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of justice. We need to see justice to the victims of the police brutality, to Ojwang, to the kids who are coming out of school who are shot. We need to see justice for these people. And I will finish by saying this. Change is a law of nature. You can't fight it. And this nation will change, whether those in power want it or not. Change will come. Two, change is uncomfortable. That's why we are facing resistance. And as a matter of fact, it's on record that the only person who enjoys change is a baby in a wet diaper. But change is coming. Number three, change has both victims and beneficiaries. Those who embrace it will be beneficiaries. Those who resist it will be victims. Okay. So I request that the government embraces the change that we are requesting, and it's just a change for accountability that is guaranteed by our constitution.
Yes, advice, briefly.
Ayub, once again, I'll say that the loudness of our emotions does not solve anything. What solves is the loudness of our reason. That we must go back as a society and think, and as a generation, we must be able to be reasonable. Otherwise, when we do everything on the whims of emotions, is what drives us to start saying that Kenya, as a society, we have a culture of respecting the OG. Those are results of emotional thinking. When you do that, those are the reasons why we'll get to places where you can be a lawyer, and then you'll tell us that an economist will become an attorney general at some point. Our constitution rightfully stipulates our academic qualifications for every office, including the office of the president.
Absolutely.
So everything that we are talking about that is academic is clearly in the constitution. So it's not about how largely emotional we become, but we as a people must become reasonable. And when we become reasonable, we'll go back to the dictate that tells us that every problem that we are complaining about today and every leader that we are complaining about today was put in office by us. The first person who holds the blunt, the first person who actually is responsible for all our cries today is we the people. So we must interrogate ourselves, and we must be able to look at, going forward, what are we supposed to do?
Thank you.
Going forward, what decisions do we make as a people when we get to the ballot? Will we make reasonable decisions or emotional decisions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayub.
Yes, Jimmy.
Mine, as we wind up, I want to come back to our youth and the youth of this great republic. Who form largely the bigger chunk of the population, and tell them we have a country to look after. We are no longer the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today. So as we propagate and as we try and change what is happening, let us also be part of the solution. Let us not be part of the problem, because again, we would not be fighting for what we can't do, and we are doing what we are not supposed to be doing. So as we go on, I would request even His Excellency, the President, the Deputy, to learn, come and talk to us, come and talk to the youth like your kids. Let communication between government and the youth be something that of top priority, so that we can be able to understand systems of government as we move on.
Yes, Council.
Allow me to say this. These are the words by one of the musicians called Pink. Allow me to read this to the President. Dear Mr. President, come take a walk with me. Let's pretend we are just two friends and you're not better than me. I'd like to ask you some questions, if I can speak honestly. What do you feel when you see the homeless on the street? Who do you pray for at night before you go to sleep? What do you feel when you look in the mirror? Are you proud? How do you sleep at night when the rest of us cry? How do you dream when the mother has no chance to say goodbye? How do you walk with your head held high? Can you even look me in the eye and tell me how? But I know I would never get a chance to walk with the president.
Yes.
Since the government spokespeople have decided to make emotion the subject matter of this conversation, I like to remind them something. You know, when you're a decision or a judgment is a precursor of an emotion. Oxytocin is a chemical that's responsible for emotions, whether happy, angry, sad, that's still an emotion. And when Hassan said that an angry youth can't get anywhere, I want to tell her, a revolution is not for happy people. Revolutions are for angry people. So if you tell me the youths are angry, then and you are channeling towards any cause of revolution, then that is the right cause. Because when you look at the history of revolution, all the Protestants, all the people, all the citizens, they were angry. And that is the right emotion to channel in the right place. Well, in regards to the impact, whether felt or not, we had a simple message, Siri ni watu. It was a clear message to tell the people of Kenya that come 2027, come next time during any demonstration, we are the numbers and we have the numbers. And to finalize on my subject is, with the youth, we need to have a sober judgment. We need a sober leadership.
Thank you.
In the sense that we need leaders that they put and sacrifice our needs ahead. We need leaders that we can trust, and we need leaders that they can keep their word. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan.
My final remarks, moving forward, we need to organize or we'll freeze all out. And that is a fact. Hashtags do not sign bills. The politicians and the representation of people that we put out there are the people that are responsible for that. We cannot impeach a leader with memes. We need processes and we need a way to do that. And that is a fact that we as Gen Z or we as the young people have to understand. And the only ways to do that, and I think advisors are able to say that, we need to mobilize a voting bloc. Let's face this in the most democratic way, that our institution that we all value, and we say that the sovereignty power belongs to the people, is by us making sure that we actually take the votes and we organize a very good mobilizing voting bloc of the 15 million young people that we are into the ballot, and we make a valid decision.
Thank you, and much appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. Advice Mundalo Jimegi kwa Hassan Mboto, Eric, Christopher Muraidi, sorry, Mudhoni Mburu Council, and Nyabul Okinyo for your time here on the broadcast. And I appreciate your company here. This is from one of our viewers in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. He says that what Kenya needs at the moment is redemption strategy. This is what the young people in the studio are saying, which I have been championing for. Lack of communication strategy has also killed Kenya. He's one of the ardent followers of this broadcast. Watching from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Asanteni, much appreciated. Morning.